by the life of George Whitehead. He was a great mentor to many, a good friend to all. I think he lived a life that was full of excitement. He loved Parks and Recreation with a passion, and I think he gave everything he had to SIPRA and to each of us that he had, and we dearly miss him and the friendships that he had. And SIPRA just felt that it was appropriate to honor him in some way at a facility that he had a large part in bringing to not just Carbondale but to Southern Illinois. And this is the bench that we have purchased and would like to make this donation to the golf course and to the Carbondale Park District. If anybody has any stories they'd like to share, I think that'd be appropriate at this time. I don't know, was 7th hole chosen for any particular reason?
It's our signature hole.
Okay, it's your signature hole. I also just 7 oftentimes in the Bible is a very significant number. It signifies completion, perfection, 7 days, and I think that's kind of a neat little part of that the 7th hole was chosen. I think George probably was greeted with a job well done, my good and faithful servant, when he entered the gates, and I think that 7th hole is a perfect spot myself. So if anybody has some short stories they'd like to share.
Well, I feel that the Carbondale Park District continues to serve the community. When you really examine the things that George did, big community events that involved all of our community partners, Lights Fantastic Parade, Special Olympics, sunset concerts, all of those were so well thought out and so well organized by George that they continue to this day to serve generations of people in Carbondale. And we certainly think of him when we attend all those events. I know many in the audience played a hand in starting Special Olympics. I mean, George called on his colleagues statewide to bring that to Southern Illinois. For me, George continued to be a mentor. I remember the first time I met George, I was in my 20s, and I thought he was the rec superintendent. Because he always had his shorts on, and he was moving about 100 miles an hour inside Hickory Lodge. Lenore Lewis is here. She's our longest-standing employee, and she could probably tell you the challenges that George faced over the years, but he met them head-on. I think it was Mr. Badish who told me a few years ago that if you knew George Whitehead, you didn't have an ambivalent opinion about him. He was a guy that touched you from the day you met him. I think another thing he left for the Park District was the ability to work as a team, as a family, really. So when people struggled or their personal lives, people come and go. As the young staff members, we took care of all of those things. George empowered us to do the right thing always and to take care of each other. So he brought us great public events. He taught us how to behave as a team at the Carbondale Park District. And I have to say that George kind of even touched our spiritual lives. If you ever rode in that gold van when George was driving, we all prayed. So, for me, George is a happy memory. I miss his, to this day, to just call George. He always made himself available to me, sometimes just questions. Great steward of state law and legislation. He advocated for the district, for everybody. And I do miss him. I miss his opinion and his mentorship. So I hope that the people who are here today can continue to provide the level of service that George did with his whole heart and soul, not just in Carbondale, but all over the state. So again, like Wes said, this is a great place to honor George. This is another one of his creations that will serve people for generations to come. So I do hope you'll take a minute to share something about George. Our president is here today, Mr. Harvey Welch. And I know he'd like to say a few words also. And I hope Mr. Curtis has a story for you as well.
Thank you, Kathy.
I'm not sure if you know it yet. Just saying.
Appropriate.
I need to. You can tell I'm weak and old, but I'm gonna try to stand. I think what we need to appreciate and do today is thank George Whitehead for what he did for all of us. As Kathy mentioned, he started off doing these things and he continues. We have a great park district, and a lot of that is because of George. And I think, as she mentioned, we will continue to do things because of the leadership and what he left for us. This course, and I've been fortunate enough to play golf courses all over the world, is as good as any public course in the world, and that includes St. Andrews. It is. This is public. This is ours. And George, even though in the terminal stages of his career and with us, he had a major hand in helping us get our pool. And the attitude and the cooperative spirit that taught us is going to have to sustain us until our legislators acquire some knowledge and some behavior to respond to the voters. We need to keep working together to do the recreational things that need to be done so other things will happen. And that's the legacy George left us. So I'm honored to be able to come out and say something. Certainly we miss him, but he, as Kathy mentioned, he is with us. We have a great board, we have great participants, and we're going to ask you to continue to work with us. For example, tomorrow this course is hosting the 20th scholarship fundraiser for SIUC students. 20 years we have done that, and we hope to do it many, many, many more. But it's a cooperative effort, and that's what we're going to have to do, folks. Our legislators all up and down the line are letting us down, and I don't know how to get rid of them. Can't not vote.
Too much
Catch me if I'm falling here.
It's about walked off.
Huh?
It's about walked off, Harvey.
But stay with us, help us get done what we need to do, and do that in memory and thanks to George. I know if I get to play anymore, when I get to this hole, I'm gonna get me a seat and kind of relax. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for honoring George. Let's not forget him. Help us do what he would have us do. And we do have some challenges. But the key to this, gentlemen and ladies, is to get, I know you didn't want this much, Kathy, but you give me a mic and I'm going to take it away. We need to be involved. Get involved. If we need someone on a committee or something, please come and do that. That's how we will make all these things happen. So thanks, Kathy. Thanks to George's family for sharing him with us. And bon voyage.
So many of us knew George in so many ways throughout the years. I think about him almost every day. I'm going to get emotional. I think of things I want to tell him. But I was on the park board here for 19 years. And there's a lot of things that the park district did during the time that I was on the board. But the most crowning achievement that I felt while I was on the board was we hired George Whitehead as a director. It outsteps anything else. And George and I spent many years and many miles all around this country and this state. And as has already been said, I mean, the things that he was so much a part of, SIPRA, he loved it with a passion. The other day at Mount Vernon, I looked over and Debbie was sitting there and I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "We're trying to figure out how many people we're going to need to replace George." And I mean, you know, he just did so many things. He loved SIU with a passion. He was a clearinghouse for SIU. Everybody wanted to be on George's email. Special Olympics, life's fantastic, touch of nature, goes on and on. And during George's tenure, Carbondale Park District played a major role in SIPRA, IPRA, IAPD. You guys know like I do. Everybody up there south of Kankakee, they think we get, our mail by Pony Express, and not sure if we wear shoes down here. But George was a voice to be reckoned with and to be heard. A voice of wisdom, of knowledge, always willing to share. I look around here and I see, a lot of you older friends, Jack's here, said, when Mark Badish and Robin Hall, and those guys were the lions of the IPRA, and George was right there. They were all part of that. And they provided wisdom and guidance, and it was a wonderful thing to be a part of. And, there would be times when people would come to me when I was on the board, and they'd say, "You never disagree with George." I said, "Yeah, I do. I don't do it in the meeting." I said, "If there's something I don't understand or I'm not sure of, I go into his office and I sit down and we talk about it." And I said, I was a teacher, I was a coach, I was an athletic director. I dealt with all kinds of administrators. George Whitehead was by far, heads and shoulders, the best I ever dealt with. You went in and asked George a question. If he didn't have an answer for you, he didn't make one up. He didn't blow smoke. He'd say, "I don't know, but I'll get back to you." And I would tell these people, I've learned through the years, I trust him. If he says it, I trust him. And George was a builder. He always wanted something going on. He was always inquisitive. When we go to national, we go to meetings, the miles we put on a vehicle. Because there's always something George wanted to go look at. And he had a gargantuan appetite for life. He loved his drink. He loved his food. And we did a lot of it. And it was so sad that those last years when George couldn't enjoy a good steak like he always loved. But he was a very special man to give to all of us, and I'm just happy everybody came out.
There are probably as many George Whitehead stories as there are stars in the sky. Like Mike and others, George and I covered a lot of miles and a lot of conferences and workshops and meetings together. He always wanted to drive. If he wasn't driving, he was asleep. Sometimes when he was driving, he was asleep. I took to riding shotgun with my head against the window on the passenger door, so when we'd run off the road, it'd wake me up, and I'd reach over and wake up George. And we'd get back on the road. The bench is missing a cigar lighter and a cup holder. But he was such a creative person. If there was an issue or a problem or a project, he'd figure out how it could be accomplished or who to bring together to figure it out. But he was always thinking how to do it for the community. Whether that community was Carbondale or that community were park districts and recreation departments all over the state, whether it was IPRA or IAPD. He always had an idea and was ready to put it out there and let's run it up and see how it works. By the same token, he was always willing and really enjoyed sharing ideas and exchanges about what was happening in other communities. And that's really how George and Robin and I started getting together periodically around central and southern Illinois, meeting with local Park and Recreation directors, find out what was going on with them in their communities, try and share some of our experiences, not as though we knew it all. Pretty close though, Robin, huh? And try and share that professional collegiality, I guess, which in central and southern Illinois is you know, we don't have a lot of colleagues to share with. So we kind of started calling ourselves the Three Amigos, and we'd had shirts, and we'd come into a restaurant, you know, the first one or two get there, and if I happened to be the third one in, I'd come in the door, they'd look at me and they say, they're over there. Yeah. And so it was great to be able to share. It was great to be able to feel like we were sharing with kind of the younger directors in other communities who may or may not have been privileged to have the experiences that George had, or Robin had, or I had. I think this is a wonderful symbolic gesture. I know that George is with me every day too. I hear that laugh. I hear that.
Oh,
You got
you knew when he was there.
You knew when he was there. And he'll always be missed.
Thank you.
I'm not very good at this. George would love the fact, and we talked about this earlier, that I loved my barbecue because I smell barbecue sauce. We're very good at enjoying food together. What I loved about George was just that, his love. He loved his profession. He loved his university. He loved SIPRA. He loved his friends and his family. And he was just a great example. I miss him, and I love him to death. Go right ahead.
I don't even know what the format is, but I thought of a story.
It's perfect.
When Regina, my wife, and I moved to Carbondale in 1983, we rented an apartment at George's house. He had built a little tiny apartment in the same house that Joanne still lives in. A little tiny thing, but anyway, that's not the point. It was a really warm fall, and so when we went to visit Regina's family in Champaign for Christmas that year, it had been warm all the way right up through, so we turned the heat off in our apartment. And sure enough, some kind of an Arctic vortex came in. And the pipes froze and burst, and it was a huge disaster. It was awful. So we came back, and there's George working on the pipes, fixing them and everything, and I'm feeling really awful. So I went up and I said, George, I kind of feel like this is our fault. And he goes, well, it is your fault. That's right. But he didn't hold it against us. And probably because it was Regina and me. If it was just me, he probably would have been really angry. But he was really nice about it. And he did all the work to fix the pipes. We did pay for the pipes. But we didn't pay him for the time he had to put in to fix them. And then I told that story later at a conference, like 30 years later. And George was there and he said, oh, I forgot all about that. And I thought, oh, I never should have brought it up. Anyway, he was really great about that. We miss him too.
Anybody else? Are we good?
I got it.
Go right ahead.
I met George 1985 when I was a rec student. I did my internship at the Park District in 1986. But my best memory of George was much later. I'm the director of the Boys and Girls Club, and we, as part of the Positive Youth Development Coalition, started a family vacation night with this group, and we came up with the idea of doing the gift of giving right before Christmas. Taking paper and wrapped them and put them all together to be given away to Good Samaritan House and kids in the hospital. Well, we needed Santa Claus, and guess who we got? We got George, of course, Santa by George. Talk about a force of nature. So, I was telling this earlier during lunch. Somebody said, I bet he scared away a lot of kids, didn't he, with that ho, ho, ho. But he also brought them back. He was Santa. He was Santa in the Lights Fantastic Parade. So what I remember that night, we had about 60 people probably in the Civic Center. If you've ever been in there, there's a long hallway. And we're in the big room by the stage, and it's kind of loud. We've got Christmas music, and halfway down the hall, we start hearing ho, ho, ho. Only George could do it that loud. And it started to get really quiet. The closer he got, people were hearing this guy coming down the hall. Well, he didn't come in with an empty bag. We said, Santa, we need you to bring in 12 pizzas, which we had. So he's coming in with his bag. He's got 12 pieces up on his shoulder, doing his ho, 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 laid them down. And at the end of the night, we took all those gift-wrapped gifts, put them in his bags, and he went out and down the hall yelling ho, 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 with bags full of gifts for other people. And, you know, the gift of giving was George. So, what a guy.
Nothing else?
Okay. Thank you guys
Thanks
for
for coming.
attending SIPRA. This will be a lasting memory. He'll live long and affect SIPRA for many years to come. And we appreciate everybody's attendance today. And you can take your turn having a seat if you like before you go. Make sure you read everything on there.
Picture of SIPRA members.
Yeah, maybe that would be good to have the SIPRA members behind the bench.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Anytime you're praying or in the neighborhood, just come by and say hi to George.
Give a little tap.